This conference will now be recorded.
Right, we have discussed yesterday what are the standards we need to have when we are creating the VM, right? So let's discuss further. So let's quickly recap and move on further. So first we need to have a subscription, it's a minimum, and we should have a resource group. Then we can create the resources. The hierarchy we discussed right yesterday. First you need to have activated subscription, then resource group, then resources. Resources can be anything. Everything can be called as a resource basically. Like it is SQL server service, database, or managed instance, web server service, a VM, whatsoever you create, that is a resource. And the resources should be created under resource group. Resource group should exist under subscription. This is a hierarchy we need to follow. Without that, we cannot create the resources. Right? We have a subscription, we have a resource group. Now I'm going to create a VM. So we discussed the naming conventions, guys, the standards of naming VM. Like if it is a production means it will start with the PP. If it is a staging means it will start with SS. And we discussed the naming convention. So every day we don't need to follow that. I'm just giving a VM, SQL VM 01 and the region where I can create the server. So this server, generally in the projects, you have to create the server where the client is operating from. So that should be identified by architects actually. Architects should give the details where the VMs need to be deployed because you should not deploy just blindly a VM anywhere, right? So you should get the performance out of it. To get the performance, you need to deploy the VM nearest to the operation center. That must be known to you before you deploy the VM. Then availability option, we spend a lot of time on this one. We have two options to protect the VM, right? One is the update domain and the fault domain. And fault domain will protect the server against the accidental failures, and update domain will protect the servers against the planned outages. Both we have discussed. And we're going to discuss this again when we configure the always on. It is mandatory to do that basically, okay? Which is fine. So then we talked about the operating system, whatever you wanted. There is a huge list of operating system, whatever you wanted to choose. You have a very huge list of operating systems about not only Windows. Windows, if you look at, there is a huge list. You see this one. And if you wanted to see the Red Hat, we have only one. And Debian, these many are there. And if you look at Ubuntu server, there are only one flavor added. And the Bitnami, it is also one of the operating system, it seems. I never used that anyway. So these are all operating systems based on the CentOS is famous anyway. This is kind of a free, you know, CentOS flavors. So this way you can get a lot of operating systems if you want. So if you are finding your operating system in this general list itself, just pick up from there. If not, go and browse the operating systems. Then size, computing family, we discussed computing families of 5 types. We have general purpose, memory optimized, compute optimized, storage optimized, and GPU optimized. So you have to know what is the purpose of the VM. If it is a pre-prod, load into general purpose to save the cost. If it is a web server, app server, you must load that VM into compute optimized system. If a database server, should go into memory optimized. If it is a data warehouse servers or NoSQL server, should go into storage optimized servers. If you are building an applications which are related to gaming applications, that should be loaded into GPU optimized computing model. So there are predefined architectures done by the Microsoft. You have to claim it properly so that you know you get the expected performance out of them. If you choose the wrong family, wrong size, then obviously it will impact the performance. I just spot instance, I'll come back to this today. I'll finish this topic, but before I finish that, I need to discuss few more things. Then only you understand this. So let's park this for now. Next, you must have one account to connect to the VM. It's mandatory to connect. So by default, you cannot join a VM to domain. So generally, we wanted one account to be available on the machine when it is created to get into that VM and join to the domain, whatever you want it to do. There should be one account. Without that, we cannot progress. We must add it. Inbound port roles. We're going to spend here two classes basically. How inbound rules will affect the connectivity of anything. If you wanted to connect, SQL Server or VM or any other service, you must open the respective ports. Anyway, we're going to spend 2 classes on this one. This is such an important thing to understand. So for now, I'm parking this. We're going to discuss this in the networking module as a introduction itself. No need to worry. Licensing, you already have the on-prem infrastructure and you're already using some licenses. Go and use the same license in the cloud also. You get straight away benefit. Yesterday I was showing that the cost 3000 now. If I just check this one, the bill will come down automatically. So that's what the hybrid benefit means. Okay. So the amount of bill will be reduced by the Microsoft automatically, just to encourage people to, onboard into the Azure itself. 600 rupees are reduced, right? So that way you can save the cost of the VM. Right, disks. Disks, today's discussion is all about disk today. We're going to spend a lot of time. There are three types of disks we do have. One is a standard hard disk and standard hard disk, standard SSD disk, and premium SSD disk. So standard hard disk is the one you have to use all the time. For your practice, don't use the SSDs. They are the high cost storage that we have in the cloud. So first, to create the live servers are also standard hard disk. So how do I know that the SQL server is scaling with the local, like whatever the disk you added to the SQL server? It is simple anyway. We have multiple methods, to identify. Let me show in my local machine, and I'll show in the we're not installing a SQL server in the VM, right? So you have a SQL server. How do I know that my SQL server is scaling well with IO or not? Current IO, what is given by the storage? So go to activity monitor. We can find this in many ways, basically. We can find in the activity monitor, we can find in the task manager, we can find with the queries also. There are many things to find this anyway. So whenever you open data file IO and you see the response time in milliseconds, this should not exceed 10 milliseconds generally. If your storage is good, it should not exceed 10 milliseconds of any file. You see this one? If this is exceeding more than 10 milliseconds, then there is a, I mean, 10 to 20, 30 is also okay. But if it is going 100 values, you have to seriously look at your IO capacity. I mean, IO is not good in terms of read writes capacity. That's the reason the read operations are waiting for the IO to free up to pick up the operation. So whatever the is waiting time, this is what is the waiting time by the disk IO subsystem, because of it is overwhelmed what it can give you basically. So let me, do I have very big database here? Let me see once. If I, yes, I'll just, there's no big database, fine. I wanted to just load something from database. So then it will display in the list whenever you see the do this operation. Let me keep this open just for the sake. I mean, make you understand which table is actually big. Let me see. Sales order details. Okay. Record is this and reserved, and this is the biggest one. Sales dot individual looks bigger than all other. Record wise less, but it is big in terms of data occupancy. So sales dot individual. Okay, let's read that. It's not coming.
Master.
I mean, must okay. So if I'm reading this, you'll find that there is an operation is going on that file. You see this one? It happened on adv.mdf. This is where I read the data. So whatever you read, it went up to response time 13. So it is hovering in between 10 to 20 is okay. 30 is also okay somewhat. But if this value is really high, you should consider that your storage is not good, and you have to work with the storage system, so storage team to improve the IO. Like this storage is not scaling. Or else if you're keeping everything in one drive and hitting all the time one drive is definitely is going to take the impact. You have to stripe the data. So this is what, guys, when you're reading it, it is going to tell you that what is the impact on that one. So if you look at the response time on the file and tempdb, what is IO is going on? What is the disk response time? It went up to 5 and this went up to 13 also. So if you are doing a huge bulk operation, what can happen, right? You need to just analyze that way. So if you look at these values are going really high, absolutely the storage is not scaling. That way, first go with the standard hard disk and look at the like IO operations, how they are going on. If really needed, you can scale up to standard hard disk. Standard hard disk will give you a better IO performance than the standard hard disk. And you see the really bad, see, mostly productions will go into standard SSD only. Premium SSD is very costly. If I'm paying $100 to the VM with a 1 TB storage, if I'm going to the premium SSD with 1 TB, $100 to it will go to $170 straight away, almost double. It will double the cost of the server. There is a huge implication on the billing. You have to be very careful before using the premium SSD. Standard hard is somewhat okay. They are controllable in terms of cost. Premium SSDs are damn costly. Don't go for it unless until it is really, they don't want to see any latency in milliseconds also. Like they don't want that go beyond 10 milliseconds also. This latency is 1 to 2 milliseconds. This latency is 1 to 10 milliseconds. This will depends. It's just normal hard disk kind of. This will give you best type of performance, but they are equally costly. You have to be very careful when you're claiming on the VMs. Anyway, we're going to see that how we can change the hard disk on the VM if required. How do I know? Let's do one more thing. Just a minute. Come on, cannot open task manager. I'll show this one more thing. I mean, you can also find here also if you know how to check this. Open the resource monitor. There is something called disk. Here also disk response time is actually you can see it absolutely. So what's disk response time is going at the moment. So I read this one. It is in the cache. It is cached. It won't go to the disk anymore. Why? Because data is cached into my system memory, right? So sales order details. Let's go to the next table to read that from the disk. Because this was the next bigger one, right? I guess we have seen in the list. So if I'm reading this one and look at this, and whatever the file, whatever the IO is going on live at the moment, it will update that in the list here, and then it will update also what is the response time for that file. And if I'm reading this from this, what is going on, right? When it is going on, you'll find that file here in the top. Somewhere you will find that file. It should be updated here when it is reading it. Somewhere ADF, adv.mdf should be updated here. Was it done? It is done and it is ran for 1 second actually. This one should be. Do you see adf.mdf? Here it is. Here it is. See what is the response time for this? 2 milliseconds, which is good. See, I'm reading data from one of the data file, and the response time that one is 2 milliseconds, which is good. It's not too high. The value of that when I am reading the data from that file adv.mdf, it went up to 5 milliseconds. Okay, 5 milliseconds is also okay. It is less than 10 milliseconds. You can actually read every file, whatever is getting read in the OS level. You can find the IO response here, or else you can find in the activity monitor itself. You don't need to go that far basically. If you know how to read this one, this is enough. You don't need to go to task manager. Even you can find in the task manager also. Task manager actually it will give you all files along with the SQL or any file, any service is reading, and what is the response time for that disk what it is reading. So it will display everything. Maybe it'll be little clumsy if you feel. This is the best thing to find out your IO is scaling or not. This is very simple anyway, right? That way you actually decide on which you wanted to load the VM. Right, let's go with the standard hard disk, and disk encryption by default will be added. And let's go to networking. I'll skip this one. Management also I'll skip. We discussed about boot diagnostics. Boot diagnostics must be enabled to in order to read why the VM actually got hung. This is we must enable that, and other things we will talk about, guys. And advanced we talked about what is a host group, what is a PPG, what is a VM generation. Actually, go with the VM generation 2 VMs, which is advanced nowadays, and extensions for SQL Server I never did, and tagging we'll see. And let me create the VM. Something is missing. So validation is saying that something I missed out. What is that? Let me see. Right. Okay, availability set. I now need to go here for now. Right. A review and create. If I'm creating this VM for no, 2 CPUs, 4 GB RAM, how much I'm going to pay per hour? Let's see. So 5 rupees I'm going to pay. You can see that, right? It is giving the cost of the VM per hour automatically. So I'll use for 1 hour almost, right? So see, you have to control the cost right after the practice. Just destroy it. Don't keep it back online so that it unnecessarily charge you, right? Right. Let me create one more VM quickly. We will discuss two topics today, which in parallel to not to waste time. So I'll quickly create this, guys. Data center. Fine. Always use a standard hard disk when you practice. That's a cheap VM, like in terms of storage. The SSD disks are not cheap, so they are costly. So whenever you practice, whenever you create extra disk for practice, also always create the standard hard disk only. So whatever the cost it is showing, it is for only the OS and C drive. Whatever the extra disk you create, that is an extra cost on top of that. It's not, it doesn't include the storage cost. I mean, if whatever you're creating extra drives, that extra cost will be given at the end of the month only, or else you can estimate the cost by going to the calculator. Now both the VMs are under deployment. You can see that. And every service deployment goes through 3 stages, I said. What are they? Anybody remember?
ISD.
Yeah, ISD. Very good. Installation.
Initialization, submission, deployment.
Submission deployment.
Yes, yes, very good. Because this is an interview question, guys. You need to remember every small or big doesn't matter. It might go and deploy next 1 second, but it will go through all 3 stages in the background. Installation, submission, deployment. They are under creation at the moment. Let that get. Mhm.
When we create a VM, to connect it, it is we have to download a file, no? So
Not required.
somebody else is not
Not
required.
that is beginner people will do that, but that's not required to download. I'll tell you how people do it, but that's not required to do.
Yeah, one more thing, Ravinder.
Yeah,
Hello?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Raghu, go ahead.
So, like, for suppose the subscription we have, like, free trial.
Hmm.
So, how we can change it to, pay as we go? Like, how we can do that?
You can turn into pay as you go. Go to the subscription here.
That
You get the
option I
option.
was not able to get actually. Yesterday I was trying. I
When
could
did you
not see
create your
any service.
subscription? When did
Yesterday
you create?
only. Yesterday.
Wait for a day. It'll
Okay.
reflect. Everybody will get that option, but don't make it pay as you go for 1 month. You have the free credits. Use that. Right. So SQL VM 01 and it is up and running. Let me click on this. So now if I go and pick up the IP, what people do basically go to connect and RDP and then download this file and then make connection. It's not required. It's a beginner job. People don't know. That is why they download and they download this, then click on this, it will connect automatically. You don't need that. Just go to the VM, pick up the IP, and then MSCSC, which is equivalent to the same thing. Okay, Vijay, you're getting this?
Yeah. This is a random IP. Whenever we are up, IP will change. I think because we
Yeah, that
didn't
I'm going to
select
talk
any
about.
IP. Yeah.
You never keep the random IPs in the real world. Okay, it is a static IP only. I'm going to talk about right now about that. No need to worry. That is a discussion we're going to have it. So in the real world, IP should be static. You should never go with the random IP because if the IP got lost, it is dynamic. If you deallocate the VM, it will be gone. If it is gone, you cannot get it back online. It is not possible to get the same IP at all. It is a randomly generated IP in the region and given it to you. Once the IP is lost from your machine, you cannot get that IP at all. It is a fully algorithmic allocation. You have to make it static so it never get changed. Anyway, let it keep dynamic for some reason. I want to talk about why it should not be dynamic kind of. Okay, right. So let me close all of this. Maybe too many applications I opened.
This activity monitor you showed only to compare between SSD and HDD, or just to troubleshoot?
Not compare. You need to just know that what is the load is going on the VM, right? So I mean, in terms of IO, if you feel like your IO is not scaling, how do I know that it is not scaling? So with the current storage model, so you have to verify within the VM, come to here and then go to resource monitor and check for the response time on the disk. So if we see it is going 39 and 20, these values are not good actually. 39 something kind of. So if I change
Is
it
it
to SSD, mhm.
is it average of read per second and write per second, or some other value? Average
It
read,
is
disk read per
average.
second. There is a counter, no?
No, it is a waiting time by the operations. For the IO subsystem, it is waiting for its turn to finish. These many
Okay.
milliseconds it is waiting basically because your disk actually has some, like IO capacity. If it reaches that capacity, it will start queuing the request. It will start queuing the request to pull the data according to the request it comes to. So the more the waiting time, the worse the disk is means. So this response time should not be really high. Between up to 20 is okay. Okay. If it is really going higher, maybe if you see 100 value, it is absolutely bad. So you have to look at SQL Server is good, everything is good, but SQL Server need to connect always to the disk to pull the data into buffer to do the operation. But the SQL is okay, everything is fine tuned well, but the disk subsystem is not supporting. Still, that's a big performance impact. So you have to look at that. Right. If you go to here, you will find two drives by default. By default, you'll get two drives. One is a OS drive, one is a temporary drive. What is temporary drive? Temporary drive act like a PAE, physical address extension. Physical address extension, everybody could have heard that word, I guess. So if I check my laptop, I have how much RAM I have it. I can check here. I have 8 CPs in my laptop and 32 GB RAM. I have it. So if my 32 GB RAM exhausts, what happens? What happens in that case? The PAE will take into picture. The PAE, if I go, where do I find the PAE of this one? Go to computer properties and advanced settings and hardware
Paging file.
settings. Yeah, paging file. That's correct what you said. Virtual memory. A paging file is an area on the hard disk that Windows uses as if it were a RAM. See, it is using four 0.8 GB RAM as a disk as a RAM. If my entire RAM is fully occupied, this will act like a RAM. So this, what does it do? In case of if the system exceeds the, let me draw it for your reference. You have a RAM, okay? It will keep some space on the disk as a RAM. It is called PAE, physical address extension. Whenever this entire RAM under pressure, it will flush or move some data to, it won't flush, it will move the data to PAE drive. I mean, you on your hard drive, every machine will have it. So it will move the data there. And whenever it requires data, it will call the data back. Again, give the response back to the whatever, whoever requesting the same data again. So this will give some breathing space to the system, but it's not as good as your RAM. It is definitely not good. Why? Because it is moving the data whenever memory pressure happened. It is moving the data to PAE, calling back again when it is required. So moving and calling is a time-taking process. Your response will be delayed much in milliseconds, basically. So this PAE should be there, but not too much. It should be controlled. It should not have too big values, basically. So if I go to the VM also, this is SSD drive by default given at free of cost, and this will be added. See, every machine will have a PIE by default with the minimum value at least. That comes at by the architecture. You cannot do anything. That's the nature of the product. You see this one 1 GB as a PIE it is being used. If you wanted to change the value, don't change this. Basically, you should not uh, keep too big values basically. So currently allocated based on the IO capacity on the disk, this will decide it automatically. If I change this to SSDs, this will go up to 3 GB. The PAE will automatically increase because disk IO subsystem is good. So it will increase the value also automatically. The worse the disk, the less the PAE it will be. The better the disk, the more the PAE the operating system will pick up automatically. You don't worry about the operating system will take automatically. You should not change the values basically. You should not give more PAE also, because it, without knowing, it is moving the data and calling, but the application is getting the response time slowly because of this PA itself in the background. You don't know that it will happen that way. So better to keep limited PAE by default. What comes through the OS, don't change the values basically, right? So this is about the temporary drive. So actually, if you look at this, where it is, the PAE is actually configured. If you look at the PAE is configured uh, on that temporary drive. It's not showing the disk. It should show the disk actually.
It's on
Enable.
C automatically manage. Answer.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
right. If you
you
look
can
at
see it.
this one is actually paging file. No system managed drive. This is system managed drive. If you look at this, don't change the one to system managed. It has to be paging file only. If I keep it here and set, it does not use a PAE anymore. If I use this way, system managed size and set, you keep it this one itself. And if you look at this one, the heck, this one is also using it. Why it is changing this way? Anyway, you should not do it. If you can customize the value if you want, but don't ever do that. Basically, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, I'm checking in my laptop. Sorry. Come on, what I'm doing. I should do in the system. So the values, that is where I was actually shocking why it was picking that drive kind of. It has to be only the temporary drive. Okay. Right. This one. This one only will be used for PAE as a PAE drive basically. No paging file. This is a paging file. You can see that system managed one, which is a paging drive. It is using 1 GB. If I click on this, it is not. Come on, I should not do that anyway. System managed only. So if I check this one, it is no paging file, but this one is a paging system managed. So go with the whatever it is given. Don't change the values of 1 GB, guys. And that is actually sitting on this temporary drive. This temporary drive is the SSD drive by default. So I forgot to discuss this. Let me quickly discuss and come back to this quickly. Go to
Ravi,
the
if the
Mhm.
yeah, hi Ravi. If the server get rebooted, if the temporary files which are placed in the temporary storage disk will get lost.
No, only deallocation. I'll do that. I'll show that. Why to suggest? I'll show. If you reboot, it won't lose, but if you deallocate the VM, that will be gone.
Okay.
So one thing, guys, I want to discuss here. Every size of the VM comes with the number of disks it can support. I deployed a VM with the 2 CPUs, 4 GB RAM. It can support 4 extra drives. 4 extra drives you can add it maximum. And it is giving a temporary storage of the disk with 8 GB. You can see that the size what we got 8 GB of SSD drive. This is an SSD drive which comes at free of cost. There is no charge for this drive. If you are going with a higher size, see if I go with the 4 CPUs and 14 GB RAM, this can allow us to create 14 drives on the machine, 14 data drives. Each drive is capable of growing up to 32 TB in the cloud. One drive can grow up to 32 TB, but you never ever go beyond 2 TB. You are going with more than that. The IO, you are killing the IO. So you have to stripe the data, create one file group and add the multiple files into the file group, and each file should load it into different drives so that your operation, your request is actually loaded into multiple files basically, and the IO subsystems will get shared. You're getting the point? This is very important design, you must know it. So if I'm keeping everything, if I have a database, I'll create a file group. Within the file groups, I'll create a files. Each file should load into each different drive. Okay, whenever someone is loading the data into the table in that file group, it will distribute the data equally into all the drives. If I'm reading it, all the drives are responding. If I'm writing it, all the drives are responding. That way you have to stripe the IO. If you don't stripe the IO, you're keeping only one drive on 2 TB, 4 TB, 5 TB. It is giving that choice, means you're keep increasing it. You are absolutely killing the IO what it can give you, because you are hammering only one drive for all the operations, right? You should not do that. So better to keep in mind. So each VM, based on the size of the VM, the number of disk it can support, the temporary drive what you get is matters. It is going to change. Okay, so keep in mind that also. Fine, come back to here. So now I wanted to install the SQL Server on this. I wanted 3 drives at least, one data drive, one log drive, one tempdb drive. At least 3 drives are mandatory to create. So let me add up the drives. I have created a VM, but I did not add the drives. I wanted to add later on, or during the creation also you can do it. Let's do that. Go to adding a disk is an online. Adding a disk is online, but expanding a disk is not online in the cloud. In the Azure cloud, in AWS it is online. Anyway. So create attached disk. I wanted to create a disk. The disk name I'm going to keep it as server name. Always it has to follow server name. It is mandatory. Server name underscore for what? Data one. And it has to be for your practice. So better to go with the standard hard disk. Maybe I'll keep it 300 GB capacity drive, which is fine. And I'm going to create SQL VM01. Server name is mandatory to follow in the cloud. I'll tell you why. Log one. And standard hard disk, and I'll go with the here 150 GB of log drive and create SQL VM01 underscore temp db SD. Maybe I'll go with 100 drives, 100 GB drives. Okay. Then if I create the fourth one, it got grayed out. Why? This VM size can support only 4 drives. You are claimed 4 drives. You cannot add it anymore. That's what it is. Okay. So let's go with the install drive. Server name mandatory. I'll tell you why. Maybe 50 GB is enough, right? So right now, if I go to the VM, if I go to the like a disk management where I can see the entire drive layout on the machine, I don't find any extra drives as of now. Fine. So if you go to disk management here, you see one temporary drive, one C drive. That's it. You don't see any other drives as of now. As soon as I save it here, you'll get all the drives. It's creating the drive on the machine. Successfully created the disk. One more is at updating, virtual machine updating. So now you will see the drives like this. See, you will see like this. Now you have to bring them online. And when you're initializing, there are two options. Does anybody know the difference between the GPT and MBR? What is a GPT and what is MBR? Actually, GeoID partition table, this will allow you to grow up to 32 TB. If you are formatting a disk under GPT, the disk can grow up to 32 TB. If you are formatting the disk under MBR, master boot record, it can grow up to only 2 TB. This is the only difference you have it. GeoID will GPT let you to expand a drive up to 32 TB, and MBR will let you to expand a disk only up to 2 TB, not beyond it. So generally, it's not a good thing to keep all your in one drive. Go with the MBR only, but some environment will have a vast and enormous data. They'll go with the GPT, whichever is fine. But anyway, that will limit the capacity of the disk to which extent you can expand. So now I'm going to initialize this. First data. Let's make this one. You have to format. And when you are formatting, actually, there is something, guys. By default, the allocation unit is 8 KB, but it should be 64 KB. If you wanted to make it more effective on the IO, because the IO in the background, database will store the data in terms of extent again into pages. If a disk can read an extent, finding the page, it won't need to scan. It no need to search for that page every time. If it find the extent, if it can find the like page easily inside it. There is a huge discussion on this one on the web. You can find it. The SQL Server databases allocation must be 64 kilobytes. You get the best performance. Like that will go in a different direction, guys. Anyway, I'll take the performance tuning there. You can join. So 64 kilobytes is the best thing where you can give a good performance to the SQL Server if you are formatting the disk with the 64 kilobytes. By default, it is 8 kilobytes. Page by page, it will scan. When you go with the 64 kilobytes, it will scan by extent. If it is extent is scanning, it will find 8 pages together. So system job becomes easy there to find the page and load into memory. So this makes a lot of sense basically, but anyway, that's out of scope for our discussion. But better to format all the SQL related drives with the 64 kilobytes to get the good IO performance. It'll give a good IO capacity to the system because it knows which page quickly to read. It is not scanning the page, it is scanning the extent and giving you the pages into the memory. That makes SQL Server more effective in terms of finding the page. Anyway, you can explore that if you want. Maybe if you join the performance tuning, maybe we'll see there. Right. Next again, let's go with everything just default. Right. Now you can see the drives. See, like this. You see all of the drives. So now I wanted the SQL Server to have all these drives all the time. Assume a case. Okay. So in that case, let me make one first. Let's go to the Internet Explorer quickly. I'll make the golden VM out of it. Just follow it. I wanted to automate a VM standards deployed on every machine by default. How do I do that? As a SQL, for SQL part only I'm talking about, not for the infra. We can automate our side. So guys, there is something called IE enhanced security configuration. When you're trying to browse anything, this kind of message you would have seen in your life. Like when you're working on the server, some servers will give you this pop-up. You have to add that URL and then it'll load that. And every time you access something, it'll keep coming and you have to just give that message. This is annoying the thing, right? So I don't want this. to not to see this message, what I have to do, there is a settings. So let me download SMS. If I'm clicking on this again, this will come up, and then again I have to, every time you try to access, that will keep coming it. If you don't want that message to come, then what you have to do, I have to go to this and go to local server. There is something actually, IE enhanced security
Yeah.
configuration is on. This is the reason you're seeing this annoying message all the time. Switch it off. We will switch off anyway in the real time also. If you switch off that, you don't get that. But to not to get again, I had to close the browser and open. So I don't need to. So let me do the download. Okay, fine. It is not letting. Then I have to see, when you switch off that, just reopen the browser. It requires, else it won't take into effect. I'm going to create a situation why I'm installing this. There is a reason behind it. Okay, fine. I'll install. I'll come back to a different discussion because this installation will take some time. Come on, wake up. Right. Let's go to a different VM now. This is the reason I created two VMs actually. Right. So I quickly show how do we expand a drive on this machine. First, I need to create a drive. Sorry. Let's go to this machine, and by default, we will get two drives. One is a OS drive, one is temporary drive. Temporary drive will be given with every single VM. Depends on the size of the VM, the temporary drive will depend. And this is one of the SSD drive, which is super fast, which will be used as a paging drive. Let it use. So now, if I look at this machine, I do have only two drives that you can see it, right? So come on, let it load it. I'll quickly add one drive and I'll show how do we expand a drive in the Azure Cloud VM. There is a procedure, you cannot straight away do it because it requires a downtime. Expanding a drive is required a downtime in the Azure Cloud. AWS, you don't need it. That's a SQL VM02 underscore data 200 GB. Saving it. I'll get this drive on the VM.
Ravi, we are adding extra GB. Does that cost?
Yes, of course, it's an extra cost. It's not included in the VM. The word 5 rupees it was showing. There's an extra cost.
Okay.
Right. You see this one? This is a 200 GB capacity drive. I wanted it to become 300 GB capacity drive because it is about to fill up. So how do you expand a drive in the Azure cloud? So it's not a straightforward. Basically, you go to the VM which got that disk about to fill up, and go to the disk and go to the click on the disk which you wanted to expand. And there is something called size and performance. Here you get the option to resize, but the problem here is if I'm trying to change, the resize is grayed out. Why? What is the reason? It is grayed out. If you look at the thing here, changes to the disk size can only made only when the disk is unattached or managing the virtual machine is deallocated. So we don't detach basically. If you are detaching, a database is running on the from the drive, the server service will go down abruptly. That is not a good practice basically. You should not do it. So what is the procedure to do this basically? Okay. So first, what I'm going to do, I'm going to deallocate the VM. When you are deallocating the VM, multiple things will happen. Focus on this one. There are, like this is a very important interview question for all of you, and pay close attention on this. If I wanted to deallocate VM, it is running at the moment. I have to deallocate the machine to expand the drive. There is no other way. Click on the machine, and there is an option is given stop. If you stop from here, VM will be stopped and deallocated. The two things will happen, not one. I wanted to. When I'm stopping it, it's saying that do you want it to reserve the public IP? Let it. I'm not reserving it. It's a good thing. Let me pick up this IP into Notepad. This is IP right now. We have it. Now I'm stopping the VM. If I stop the VM, the IP will be lost because you're deallocating it. And this is a dynamic public IP. It is not a static. Dynamic. If the IP is a dynamic, if the IP is a dynamic, if you are deallocating the machine, then IP is gone. It won't be there anymore. Let's see. See, it is gone. You don't find the IP anymore. It is released because it was a dynamic. So you never keep a dynamic IPs if you wanted. In the backend database servers, we don't keep a public IPs anyway. We will run the servers on the private IPs only. Only authorized connections, VPNs, can reach the backend database servers, not through the public IP. You should not keep the public IP. Some people may keep it because of they control the access through the NSGs. That is a different story. If you are keeping it, public IP must be a static anyway. Now virtual machine got deallocated. You can see that the status was running before this one, right? This one, I guess maybe. So now it got deallocated. Whenever the machine is deallocated, it releases the public IP that we have seen clearly. It releases the public IP if it is a dynamic public IP. That is a condition. If you are deallocating the VM, it will release the public IP if it is dynamic, and also it releases the computing power back to the cloud. CPU and memory will be given back to the cloud. It won't lock the computing power at all. What it locks? Only it locks the disk. That's it. If you are deallocating the machine, you are not going to pay anything at all except the storage. If you're comparing the VM cost to the storage, 85% of the cost always the VM computing charges, not the storage. Storage is only 15% all the time. If you are going with the premium storage, that is different storage. If you are going with the standard solid state also, it will be 15 to 25%, 15 to 25% in between. 75% cost of the VM, always the computing charges only. If you wanted to decommission a VM in the cloud, first we will deallocate the VM for 2 weeks like this. We will deallocate. When you deallocate the machine, you are bringing down the cost by 75%. For 2 weeks, we'll deallocate. If no one complains, we'll delete entirely. The deletion is also separate procedure we're going to talk about. Now, VM got deallocated, stopped and deallocated. What is the background thing will happen when you deallocate VM? It is going to release the public IP if it is dynamic. It is going to release the computing resources like CPU memory back to the cloud. This is a word you have to say. So deallocation will bring you down in terms of billing basically. And when you deallocate, then only you can expand a disk. So now we have on disk, right? Click on this and I'll go to the size and performance. Now the resize is enabled. You can see that. Now I wanted to make this 200 to 300 GB. Okay, I'm resizing it. It is resizing straight away. At the same time, not only resize, I can turn this into any storage tier. We have 3 storage tiers we have, right? Standard hard disk, standard solid state disk, premium solid state disk. I can jump from here to here straight away. Absolutely. I can jump and resize. It'll get convert it into, I can do this one, not an issue. Little bit of money extra, but it's okay. We had this drive. Let me see. I mean, I changed the drive to resize is done. You can go to check the drive. If I refresh here, you can see the 300 GB drive. It is a standard hard disk LRS. Now, if I go, if I want it, it's still deallocated. I can do this. I can change the disk performance tier also. I can change it when resizing it. Absolutely possible. You can change the disk performance tiers at any point of time by deallocating the VM.
So, Ravinder, a small doubt. So, for increasing the disk space, we are deallocating, right? So, the
Hmm.
VM, whatever we have, like, if it is a web server or database, whatever hosting on that, it will be
Hmm.
completely down, right,
No,
during this period.
it is not. It's purely downtime. That is what I'm saying. Disk expansion is a downtime in the Azure cloud, whereas in AWS it is online.
Okay.
Now you see this, guys, standard solid state disk now. It was a standard hard disk. Now standard solid state. We changed the disk performance tier. We changed the disk size also, both. Now I'll start the VM. This is a procedure. You have to deallocate the VM, expand the drives. If you wanted to change the performance tier, also change it and then save it. That will get reflect, then bring it to the machine online and give it to them. This is a minimum procedure in the Azure cloud. In AWS, you don't need this because I work on AWS also. Azure is, I mean, few things are like this, but Azure is easier than AWS as per my experience because I work on both. Azure is straightforward. AWS is not. Anyway, you see this one, it got an IP now. This IP and the previous IP won't match. You can verify that. This is a previous IP. This is a new IP if you look at. The entire class is different. So once the IP is lost, you cannot do anything at all. Absolutely,
Yeah,
you
Ravinder.
cannot get it back. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Sriram. So once we deallocate the VM, we'll be incurring that VM cost as well, right, as a part of the cost. So rather than the disk, so we'll be
Can you,
incurring the VM cost. Hello.
Sriram, can you come again? Your voice is not clear fully.
Yeah, we'll be incurring the VM cost as well, right? Once
Okay, okay.
the
VM is just an object. VM, you don't get a charge. The VM is a logical object. The logical object is, like keeping your the physical resources like CPU, memory, and disk. It's a logical
oh,
object. There is no cost to the object basically. The cost is for the resources.
fine, fine. Got it.
So that way it is. Yeah, good question. Anyway, fine. What I was talking actually. Something was saying, right, public IP. So if you see the public IP, it got changed. You cannot get the same IP back online. It is not possible. You have to go with the new IP only. That is, no one can, even Microsoft also cannot support that to get the same IP back online. So you have to lock it as a static IP. So if I connect to the VM, I can get the disk with the 300 GB, and it is a standard hard disk, and this will improve the IO anyway. Okay, meanwhile, let's look at this one. This got completed. Now, I mean, this will take time, so let's finish this also. We have these many drives, guys, here. Look at FGHI, something like this, right? Now, I'm going to keep setups in this directory. Fine. I wanted to prepare a SQL Server VM, which should come with all the setups. Actually, we have this in our environment anyway. This is called, we'll call it as golden VM or template VM, whatever you can say. But we call it as a golden VM in our environment as a term. So we have to create one empty VM with the required disk layout and with the required disk format. We have to format it before we capture the template or golden VM. And then you deploy whatever you wanted on the VM and capture as a template as a OS. And then whenever you are creating the servers, use that itself so that it will come with all the disk layout, all the formatted drives already, all the setups loaded into it, and SMS installed by default because I installed SMS also, right? I installed SMS, it is there. So just try to follow what I'm trying to talk here. This is very, very important. And this will save you a lot of time for a SQL database in the Azure cloud. So you have a data drive. Let me make the label also, which is fine. Sorry. Right. We have these many drives we wanted for every SQL server that we wanted to deploy, because this is a minimum standard I wanted on every VM. That's what I'm defining it. And if you look at this one, this is also interview question. What is the operating system drive in the Azure Cloud VM? What do you see? 126 GB, but in fact it is 127 GB. This is also an interview question and exam question. It'll confuse you. It is 127 GB. A lot of people say 126 I have seen, but it's not 126, it is actual 127. What is a Windows operating system drive capacity by default in the Azure Cloud VM is 127, not 126. So a lot of people say that 126 because it's showing as 126. No. Good thing with if you see operating system, how much space it is taking? It is taking roughly 9 GB. That's it, right? It's not taking too much. 13 GB something. So you see this very huge space left in the C drive. What we have done in this is in our environment, we place the setups into this one in the golden VM. So all setups means 2008, 2002, 2012, 14, 16, 17, 19, and all edition, standard edition, enterprise edition, all setups together, all together 25 GB plus, I guess. Together we placed it in one drive itself. And then we formatted all the drives with the 64 kilobytes and with the minimum required sizes, and then we captured the image out of it, and that image we will use it for every SQL server we create. So how do we prepare a image so that I can use a custom image to build the VM? So that's what we're going to do now. So there is something called C drive and Windows, and you have a system 32. Under that you have sysprep. Sysprep. Come on. Is it here only? I guess not here. Come on, please. Sysprep. I don't find sysprep. Right, this one. So under this one, there is a setup application. You have to run this one. If you wanted to prepare this VM, once you run the sysprep, it is absolutely no usable. You cannot use the VM anymore. You have to create the VM, deploy the standards, and capture the image. So for that reason only you have to create the VM. If you keep anything valuable in this, you lose it, because this VM no more usable after creating this sysprep or making this sysprep. So you have to do this, very important, guys. System C Windows System 32 sysprep directory. Under that you'll get a sysprep. When you sysprep, you have to generalize and shut down. These two are the mandatory things. If you don't do that, the golden image won't form. Even if it is formed, you cannot create a VM out of it. It's mandatory to do this. When you are running this sysprep, you have to generalize mandatorily. You have to shut down. I'm doing it. This will take some time to prepare the VM for capturing the image. So let it take time. It is processing it. So I'll close all of this. It is just stuck. Maybe it is about to stop. Anyway, fine. It is going to close all applications. So sysprep is going on. When that is going on, if you look at this one, the other VM, we got the 200 GB capacity, but we did not expand it yet. So we're going to expand that. We have seen how do we expand a disk. You guys not confusing, right? Following, right, everyone? See, 200 GB capacity, 100 GB
Yes.
added. I'm extending the volume. Extend the volume. Next, next, finish. That's it. Now you see the capacity as 300 GB. This is a procedure to expanded drive on top of the Azure cloud. So now come back to this. What's going on? Still doing the job. Okay, it is done. Your remote desktop service has ended. Your network administrator might have ended up the connection, whatsoever. If you go to here, this could have been, it should have been stopped. Take some time to reflect. It is stopped. You can see that stopped. When the VM is in stopped mode, it won't release anything. If you are shutting down within the VM, it will stop. It won't deallocate. I'm inside the VM. If I'm stopping, just I'm shutting down the VM like this. I'm clicking on this. I'm shutting down the server for some reason. Then if you are shutting down the server, the VM will go to stopped status. If it is stopped, you are paying 100% bill for everything. It won't save you anything at all. You have to deallocate if you wanted to save the cost. Stop the VM from the cloud. Okay. So that must be done to save the cost of computing power, not completely. You're still paying the charges to the storage anyway. The OS disk is 127 GB is there. Even you don't create any drive, there is a OS drive is there that charges keep applying to you every 1 month. Okay. That should not happen. Now this is stopped. Now I wanted to take the golden image out of it, right? So click on this. There is something called capture. Even you get the capture option, the server which is not run the generalized, but the capture option is there with every VM. But the condition I'm going to tell you, it will show the condition anyway. Click on this and capture. When we are capturing the image, there is a no availability zones. Fine. There is something it will display. Anyway, share the image to gallery. You can give it to everyone in the community. No, I wanted to keep the image for myself. You standardize the VM, you can give it to gallery. Everybody can use that image in the environment in the Azure world also. Don't share it. Keep it manage, you keep it yourself. Automatically delete the virtual machine after creating the image. You can do that. It will delete the server. Anyway, we will delete it at the end as an activity. How do we decommission the server? We will see that. And here, what I this is the image I was trying to talk. So I'll keep it SQL OS. I'm just keeping a name for it. SQL OS kind of. See, there is a message if you observe this. Before creating an object before creating an image, use generalize to prepare the Windows guest OS and the virtual machine. If you create an image from the virtual machine that hasn't been generalized, any virtual machines created from that image won't start. This is what I was saying. You get the capture option on every VM, though you generalize, you don't generalize under sysprep. But whatever the images you create out of that image won't start. But if you wanted to start the VM, you must go to the VM, you have to run the sysprep and generalize and then capture the image. That is the flow. If you lose the flow, it won't work well. Fine. I'm creating an image called SQL OS, okay, for our automation. So going to here,
Generalizing means what this mean? Generalizing.
generalizing means you are just that is an option given to you to prepare the VM for capturing the image. There is no meaning in it, but it is saying that generalize. You have to generalize that. It is a sequence. It is a step. What is a generalize means? It is just make the VM to capture the image. It will make the VM ready. But what exactly in detail of it, I'm not sure. But anyway, it will
Okay.
make the VM ready for the capturing the image.
Yeah. During that sysprep, it is asking us to tick it, or because I didn't notice it.
You have to tick it. Generalize must be ticked.
Tick
If
it
you don't,
only. Okay.
if you don't tick that, this image is useless. You have to tick. That is what
Okay.
use
Yeah.
generalize is mandatory. So a review and create. We are creating an image. Okay. This will take some time. It won't take too long. A minute. These are all activities make your life easy in the cloud, guys. You know, you have to, if we don't dependent on any infrastructure guy, because we don't need it, because we know everything. We are working since very long, so we are managing everything ourselves as a product guy itself. Whenever new product comes, there we will involve networking, Windows, architect, everyone. Once things are in place, we know the running templates. The templates are run books. We will use them. We will build the servers, and we do right from the scratch to end as SQL DB. Everything. Okay. Raja is Rajashekar, right? Actually, just for the
Yes, yes,
okay,
sir.
Raj. Yeah. Okay. 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 Fine. Is it done? It seems it is done. Now we will build a VM using that image. Create a VM and we'll verify it right after that. And then we will see the procedure to completely wipe out, decommission entirely. Now when I'm creating a VM, I'm going to call this as a skill VM 5 something, whatever it is. And I'm going to claim the OS as what I have created. Okay, so we will go this way. SQL OS images. We created an image basically. Image is a service. You see this one? It is there in my favorites. Why it is there in my favorites? Because I added it. How do I add it? Go to all services and I'm going to go image and this if it is there or not. How do I say? The symbol, the star is saying that it is there in my favorites. If it is not, I'll click on that. I'll get that. So SQL OS is created here. See, I'll bring this up and disk also I'll create it. Both we need it. We will discuss a lot of services, guys, actually, as we move on. So almost whatever I had in my favorites, I'm going to talk about almost. Anyway,
Sysprep will automatically put the VM there, or did we select any location during
no
Sysprep?
location. No, you just telling the VM that I'm going to prepare image out of you using that sysprep. Run the sysprep and generalize and shut down at the same time.
Okay, it automatically put under image.
Yes, it won't put under image. We created image, right? We ran the sysprep on the SQL VM01, this one, and then we captured the image. It won't put the image directly. We captured it after it, right? We captured it just now as an SQL OS kind of,
Okay, okay.
right? So we had to capture it manually. Then that image will be formed. Now we created a SQL OS image. Every SQL server you create from this only now. Go to here, create VM. See, the disks by default are allocated. You don't need to worry about that. Create a VM every time from here only. So it will come in the OS. In place of OS, it will choose this SQL OS. Now I'm going to go SQL VM05 something, and then I'll give it is like only the default things you'll get it, but all the things again you have to select what you wanted. Right. So now licensing type, Windows Server, use this, and disk. You are getting this disk as a C drive, so you have to choose. The rest of the drives will be standard hard disk, and by default they are as per the selection. Now networking we don't talk about. Let's deploy this VM anyway. From which we are deploying this VM? From SQL OS. So if it is get created, it will have the SMS in it, it will have the setups in it, it will have all the drives automatically. They are in formatted stage. What you have to do, customer will ask you some version, some edition, go to that setup directory install and give it. That's it. No need to do build it, install and give it. No need to install SMS also. It will come by default because we already did. You guys following, I guess.
So in this case, on a new created SQL OS, so we can just install the SQL, like, latest whatever the customer is requesting, for example,
That's
2017
correct.
or 2019.
That's correct.
So
Only
everything
install
will
and
be
give it.
images, and the system is
Yeah,
also no need to create it. Just the engine need to be installed, if I'm not wrong.
that's it. That's correct. So whatever you wanted, Steve, whatever you wanted as a prerequisite, just load into it and then capture the image. So whatever you can do after it, you can do it. That way it is. So it is saving our time. Right. So, okay, this VM is not anymore useful because this got sysprepped and all that. If I'm trying to start also, let's see, it won't start, I guess.
Ravinder, if this is working, then how about, like, installing complete set of, three set of images, like, 2016, 2017 and 19 already installed images, set of three images. So when the new customer is coming and asking you to install 2016 with the VM, and in that case, we can directly use that template with the SQL installed already.
Don't do that with this method. That will come with the different method. Like we can prepare a template and point the template to the VM that is called as something I forgot. We can capture that and use that configuration.ini. You remember, right? Configuration.ini.
No.
That something goes in a different direction. Why?
Okay.
Because if you install, it'll master database will capture the server name actually in it. You create a different
Okay.
name, but the SQL server comes with the old name. Every time you can rename it. It is possible. That's not recommended way of doing it actually.
Okay.
So now if you come to here, guys, SQL VM 01, and if I'm starting, it is not starting because this is what I was saying in the beginning. It won't start if you generalize. So I had to decommission. Okay, the server is also online. Very good. Server what we just created. It's running.
Ravinder, one more doubt. This capture option only for capturing this image, or it's having any other function?
Only image. Only image. That's given for capturing the image only. We will discuss a lot of more discussion tomorrow. Today I cannot cover everything in one day. So tomorrow also we will discuss disk related operations tomorrow in detail. We have a lot of things to talk about. How do we make our job easy in the cloud as a SQL DB? Fine. So if you go to the drives, you'll find all the drives. You don't need to do anything on this except installation of the required version. So you get all the drives with all the layout, and then you'll get the setups, whatever you setups you loaded, and then install required setups. You will have SMS by default, right? Because we installed before we captured the image. Everything is ready-made. What do you need to do? Only install the required version and then do it. That's it. With this, golden image is finished. Any questions? It's SQL VM 05 what I connected right now. You can see that also server name here.
Ravi, we didn't install the SMS. Right? Management Studio.
Go ahead, please.
Management Studio we didn't install, right? We just kept that setup.exe file, right, in the capture.
We created already and before I captured the image. So I was just referring this to as a setup location. We will keep all the setups in the real time in this directory. Like see a setup directory, we kept it. We kept all the editions, versions, service packs and everything. And then In this directory, you'll come and install the required version, required edition. Then that's it. The story is ended. Here we installed SMS before I captured the image. So it is there. SMS is there by default. You don't need to install anymore
Okay,
on the
okay,
new
got
VM.
it.
Yeah. So is it clear to everyone? It's done. Golden image is done. You can create a hell lot of servers. It is a standard template now for you. Just go to here and keep creating the VM how many you wanted. Whenever you want to create here, you keep creating, it will keep creating from that image, and it gets all the standards deployed into every VM, whatever the VM you create after that. Is it clear to everyone, please? Please confirm.
Yes.
Yes, Ravindra.
Okay, then. Let's move out of this. We are done with it. Now let's look at the cleanup process. Cleaning up a VM. So this will be the last topic for us. We have a lot of discussions tomorrow anyway. See guys, if I delete a VM, it won't delete the associated disk. Only it will delete the it will delete the object, VM object itself. So if I'm deleting the VM, are you sure you wanted? Yes, I want to delete it. It's unstoppable action. If you delete and said yes, okay, you cannot revert it back. But what if the case that live server got deleted? How do you recover? That is tomorrow topic. Someone deleted a live server, we can recover without any data loss. The entire server, not through the backup. We have an activity. I'm going to talk about that. Anyway, that's tomorrow topic because we cannot finish the topic tomorrow today. Come to the disks. So you deleted an object, good enough. It will delete all the object and computing power, but not its associated disk and also associated IP also. There is no IP, it was dynamic anyway. So now come to the disk service. There is something called disk. So you see this one, these disks are without the owner, and this disk belongs to VM01. That is the reason every disk you create on top of the VM, it must follow the server name first, then name. So that if the server got decommissioned, when you delete a VM, it will only delete the object, not the associated disks. Disks you have to delete manually to clean up that entire VM. So it's a manual job, you have to do it. If not, you're deleting the computing power, but the storage is still under charge. So associated disk won't get deleted. This manual task, you have to do it. This will complete your machine decommissioning. You have to do this manually. There is no other way. Now these disks
Ravindra,
will be gone.
C and D drive and all will go automatically, right? Once I delete that disk.
No. That also won't go. They'll be there. D drive will go, the temporary drive. That is there or not there, there is no charge for it. But the rest of the drives, whatever you created, they won't go. They will stay like that till you delete. So every time you decommission a machine, you have to definitely clean up associated drives without fail. If you don't do, they will stay in the background. You keep getting the bill for it. Someone was saying something. Vijay, you have a question?
No, sorry.
Okay, it's okay. So this is what about VM decommissioning, guys. First, what do? We'll stop the VM for 2 weeks and deallocate it. Deallocation will bring at least 75% of the cost of the VM. And then after 2 weeks, no one is complaining it. Delete the object, delete the associated disk, and delete the associated IP also. That will clear the issue. So now public IP also you have to delete. If it has a public IP, backend servers won't have a public IP generally. So SQL VM01 IP is there, but there is no IP allocated. There is no charge as long as IP is blank. There is no cost associated with it. But anyway,
I think that the C drive will be deleted along with the VM, correct?
no, that also won't delete. Everything will retain back. Everything.
C drive also we need to create because
Yes.
that came along with the VM. Okay.
That also won't go. You have to delete manually. That's the process anyway here. We cannot do anything in that.
But we are not putting a name for C drives when we create a VM.
Right, you're not giving, but that comes with automatically. See, this is a SQL VM due to OS disk, SQL VM 05 OS disk. You will get the VM name automatically with it.
Okay, okay.
You know what to worry about.
Yeah.
The operating
Okay.
system drive 127. That way also you can identify capacity. So I don't want to start a new topic and end up in middle. So we have a lot of interesting topics yet to discuss at the VM side. So any questions before we stop? So once you have done all the practice, you don't want anything behind the scene, just go to here and then drop the delete the resource group. Click on the resource. You have the resource groups. You created a lot of services for practice. Click on the resource group, delete the resource group. Everything is gone. You never do this in the real time, but you have to do it yourself to bring down the entire cost. This will clean up everything that you have, every single thing what you created. There is something called network watcher RG. It will create by default along with the VM. Why this will get created? To monitor your internal network. That I'll cover in the networking anyway. This makes more sense in the networking discussion, but this also you have to delete every day. After the practice, you delete. No, this is no document. There is no document for this because this is purely navigational. You need to understand, guys. This VM operations don't have SQL operations. Mostly we have a document. I'll share it, but these are all navigational understanding. There is no document because we were switching here and there a lot of times. So there is no documentation for it. You have to capture from the video itself. You have to practice and understand. Document does not make sense for this discussion. Okay, so anyway, I'll share the documents wherever we have documents for a lot of things. I'll share it. Okay, fine. Any other question from anyone before I stop the video? Stay back.